Good morning, everybody. I'm glad to see that you all survived the Christmas season and are all looking pretty fulfilled and also pretty happy this morning. Before you, as you're leaving today or over the next couple of days, you might take just a couple of moments to spend some time with the creche or the crib in the foyer of the church. I think it's very well done. It's very beautiful. It's the story of today's feast. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph in the stable, and it's a very serene kind of picture. But after listening to that gospel reading, you realize that their life wasn't going to be that serene. That is, Simeon, the prophet, taking the baby in his arms, said to Mary, he says, "This child is destined for the rise and fall of many in Israel." And then he says, "A sword will pierce your heart because of this child." In other words, basically what he was saying to her, that you're going to suffer greatly because of this child. And obviously, as you read the story of the life of Mary, she did suffer greatly, but obviously, behind all the suffering, her faith did sustain her. So we think about that this morning. We think about ourselves, and we think about our challenges, and to what extent we remain faithful to the Lord in the process. And I'd like to sort of enter into this little reflection by looking at my what I would call my own story, if you will. I was born in the year 1944, and that was just about 35 years after Ireland got its independence. So it was a very challenging time in the country, because basically they got a country, but they didn't get much with it. So financial situation was very bad, and life was a struggle. My family had a small farm, and so in the farm, basically, because of weather conditions, because of financial conditions, etc., with the farm, it was sort of one step forward one day, then two steps backwards, and it went on like that for several years. And my poor mother, when bad things happened, like when we'd lose an animal or something like that, I mean, she took it very badly. She really went into hysterics. My father, on the other hand, when something bad happened and she was sort of downcast, his reaction was, worse could happen, or it's not the end of the world. So actually, the two of them clashed quite a bit over their perception of what life was all about. I was one of three boys. I was the youngest of three boys, and we helped out in the farm as much as we were able at that point in time. And I think besides that, it was sort of easy to be a young person back then. There were very few temptations around. When I was 10 years of age, we got what we got the light. That is, first electricity was turned on for the first time for us when I was 10 years of age. Up until that time, it was very dark. You think it's dark here at night. It was pitch dark at night, so I was a young person, I was always scared in the dark. Then actually, when I was 12, we got a radio for the first time. And I think the year after that, or maybe 2 years after that, I was in the local village, and I was looking in the window of a bar because there was a television set inside. First time, I was 13 years of age. It was the first time I actually saw a television set. So as I said already, life was fairly simple, not too complicated, and not easy to get into trouble. My mother and father had only gone to like 8th grade, but it was nice to see my father able to kneel down in the morning or at night and say his prayers, which he did consistently. My mother said even more prayers than he did, and also she tried to continue to insist on that as a family that we said the rosary. Well, sometimes that worked out well, and sometimes it didn't, because the three boys, we'd be kneeling on the floor, sort of over a chair, with your elbows on a chair, and you'd have rosary beads in your hand, and there might be a cat or a kitten underneath, and you dangle the rosary beads, and you know what's going to happen. So there'd be a lot of play acting going on. Everybody would be laughing, and my mother would get mad, and so the rosary would be would sort of be called off for about 2 or 3 weeks, 2 weeks at a time. The bottom line, anyhow, is at the end of the day, what we learned, I suppose, what I learned from my takeaway, if you will, from my growing up. Number one, the importance of faith, and the faith was what sort of, I think, sustained them during a very difficult time in their lives. Number two, the importance of education. That is, they knew how bad life was for them, and they ensured that all three of us, that we would get a good education, and thanks be to God, that did happen. And I think the third thing I learned, which has sort of stood by me for up till this stage of my life, and that is that for me, my needs as an individual are very simple, and I can live with a lot or live with very little, because when you grow up like that, you learn life's lessons very well, and I am grateful for that. So back then, I'll just give you a sort of if you will, a snapshot insight into a very challenging situation back then. With Ireland had very little to sort of grasp onto. Then look at the situation we're in right here. You could say it's almost the exact opposite. That is, we are living in a land of plenty. And in a sense, that is a blessing, but it can also be a curse. And you know that as well as I do, because when you have a lot, sometimes instead of being content with it, you want more. Or sometimes when you have a lot and you, instead of using it wisely and well, God gets sort of left out in the process. In other words, when you have a lot, you don't seem to need God that much. So there is that challenge all the time to, in a sense, keep God in the home, and also, of course, to keep God in the church. And also the other challenge, which is enormous in this day and age, is we have, thanks be to God, we have the internet, and we have the cell phone, which I have here on my hip. Great on the one hand, but just when you consider the amount of temptation and challenge from having the internet, young people are growing up in a very, I would say, a very challenging, a very difficult situation today. And I mean, I don't know the answer in terms of how to help young people, other than the fact that I do know the importance within the home, the importance of family prayer, number one, and also where families really make sure to take the time to talk to each other. Because if they don't do that, then it's very easy for young people to drift in a variety of different directions. So just in conclusion, I say I grew up in a challenging situation where God was really needed. We're living in a situation where we have so much that we don't seem to need God that much, okay? But yet we do. At the bottom line is we need Him a lot more than we realize. So I think starting a new year together, I think we should pray for ourselves and pray for our country to have a deeper awareness of God's presence, God's grace, and God's love in our lives. And I think the more we can do that, and in order to do that during this coming year, I would suggest that you might do something special. For example, you might at least, if you can at all, 1 day a week or 2 days a week or 3 days, go to a daily mass besides going to a weekend mass. And if you cannot do that, then once a month we have adoration of the Blessed Sacrament that goes on all night. It's on a Friday night. So again, if you cannot do go to Mass one day a week, I'd suggest that you do that, because I think we should need to be doing a little bit extra in our lives to show that, not just to show, but to express our belief in God. And I think also the need for God's love and God's grace, not just in their own lives, but in the life of our entire country. Amen.